So, this video is about fire through the tarot. That being said, we need to talk about something a little bit important before we just jump straight into the wands, which are the suit of the element of fire in the tarot decks. For the sake of this video, at least. When I did the original video on the swords cards and the element of air, that was under the understanding that there was more available resources for you and you could seek them out. However, in the time in my absence, those resources are gone now. So we're going to go through those as well. And then we're going to go and do the same thing for water, and then we're doubling back to air, then we're doubling over to earth, and then we're finishing it like the YHV formula, the Tetragrammaton. That's how we're doing this. And we're starting with the majors. So buckle up. The first major we need to talk about is the first card that is associated with a fire sign or a planet that rules a fire sign, and that would be the Emperor card. In the Rider-Waite deck, this card is associated with authority figures, kind of structure, the person who is the biggest boss of all the bosses. You can kind of talk smack to a king if you're in another, if you're in another suit, but nobody talks shit to the Emperor and lives. Given that the sign of this card is Aries, that kind of makes sense. How hot-headed are Aries? Aries is the most hot-headed of all the signs. In fact, my sun sign is Aries. That being said, it's kind of just a grand authority figure, and this is the person who, if they say the word, things are going to get done. And we see this in the sign of Aries. Now, mind you, this is the sign of cardinal fire, so this is kind of the card representing the beginning of all action. And we can kind of see that by, if the Emperor says something, then everyone in the Empire jumps to get that thing done. Now, we gotta jump all the way for the next card, which is going to be the Tower. Now, anyone familiar with tarot will know that the Tower is not a good card. The planetary associated with the Tower is Mars, which is all about destruction, warfare, murder, death, lust, all these kind of very driving forces. And if a building was collapsing around you, you bet that you would probably, if you have any sense of self-preservation at all, attempt to flee the building as soon as possible. Now, the tarot card itself, the Tower, represents sudden change, upheaval, chaos, mass destruction, and just generally disaster usually. It can also be used for a positive shakeup in your life. However, this situation is in fact in the minority, and as such, we're not really going to count it at the moment. So here we see from the two cards that are the kind of ruler of cardinal fire in the astrology, and the sign of cardinal fire, that the first part of fire is about provoking movement. And this will be a recurring theme throughout the rest of the cards here. Movement is a big thing. Action is a big thing. These are all things are associated with fire, and the tarot demonstrates this very well. It also is one of the two elements of change. We will see more of that as we progress. The next card we're going to talk about is actually the card representing the sign of Leo, which is fixed fire. That being, we are going to be talking about the Strength card. Whereas with the Emperor card, that card was all about authority. This is more about strength of will. As we can see by the picture on the card, the woman has the power of the infinite divine at her side, and she is making the lion not attack her, as would normally be the case in most situations. This is very reminiscent of, if you've ever seen those photography of the people posing with animals in the wilds. Like, the wild animals are just like, oh, hey, I'm here, like, have a good day. Like, I'm waving, I'm a bear, waving. This is a lion, but the premise is still the same. Traditional meanings of this card are strength, obviously, courage, persuasion, influence, and compassion. It can also just be sheer force of will, I've noticed. Generally speaking, if you have a strength card, you're going to be fine. The card associated with this is the card associated with the sign of Leo. The sign of Leo is all about dynamic force of will performances, drama, fun. It's not a bad card to demonstrate this, and Leo is also about just, it's another rulership thing. Leo is the sign more of a king. Leo is less the sign of just dynamic, authoritative assholes. That being said, that is a negative trait of Leo's, but c'est la vie. So the next card we're going to talk about is the Sun card, as that is the ruler of Leo. The Sun card is one of the most positive cards in the deck. It's got a fun-loving child, the sun is shining, there's sunflowers. It's a card associated very much with the youth and happiness and positivity, and as such the meanings are positivity, fun, happiness, success, victory, those kind of things, as he is carrying a banner on his horse, which could easily be read as a victory banner of all things. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the Sun card is associated with the planetary ruler of Leo, which is the sun, which is very much about the same thing. Sun is all about positivity, happiness, success, all those things. And it is also literally, if you use linguistic naming puns, the sun is considered the son of the supernals. So that's kind of, yeah, that's why there's a child. Now, the next card we need to talk about is actually a rather interesting one. The next card we need to talk about is actually the card associated with the sign of Sagittarius. That card being Temperance. Temperance is kind of a weird card for fire. Temperance is more about balancing, moderation, patience, purpose, yet right on the symbol in the middle of the card, smack dab in the middle, that triangle is the symbol for fire. It's the alchemical symbol for fire. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but it makes a lot more sense when you look at it from the perspective of it's also associated with the sign of Sagittarius, which is more of a card about seeking. So in this card, it's all about, Sagittarius is very much a card about seeking higher purpose, developing yourself. It's all about internal seeking as well as external seeking. Sagittarius is very much the sign of travel. And if we look at the card, we can actually see that the person, the angel here, does actually have a destination next. He is mixing the two cups, which is kind of indicative of the mutable nature of Sagittarius, as it were. But it is also indicative that he is going towards the dawn at the back. There is a clear path designated for him behind him, and there is a rising sun of sorts behind him, showing that he is on the path to enlightenment, as would be the kind of, sort of, the way that Sagittarius would work. And this kind of is indicative that fire is all about aspiring to a higher goal. Fire is all about action, but fire has action to a purpose when it is balanced, as this card shows. Continuing on with cards that don't seem like they should be fire correspondent in the slightest, we have the card that rules over Sagittarius, and as such, the card that corresponds to Jupiter, which is the ruler of Sagittarius, is the Wheel of Fortune. Now, the interesting thing about this is when we go back and look at this card, it shows us with the 4 cherubic animals, that being the 4 animals that are representative of the fixed signs, which is to say the signs as their most primordial form. And to this end, this shows kind of a knowledge of what the 4 elements are capable of. This shows that Jupiter knows what the 4 elements are capable of, and as the Wheel of Fortune card is kind of associated with luck, karma, cycles, turning points, changes of fortune, that general kind of thing, we can see that if we were to take one of the wheels, or one of the spokes as it were, and look at this, we would notice that this card is also containing the alchemical symbols of various things. It's holding the alchemical symbol of salt, sulfur, and mercury, because those are alchemical changing things, and alchemy is the process of changing one thing into another. So, knowing again that this is mutable, mutable is changing from one thing into another. And the two cards that are associated with the mutable fire sign are, in fact, all about balance and change. So this would be fire is changing things for the better if it is properly balanced and maintained. Now, we haven't gotten into the minor arcana yet. That being said, the minor arcana will show us what happens when fire is not properly balanced. And in so doing, we will notice that, generally speaking, in terms of the way that the tarot was structured, there are certain things that keep cropping up in all the suits, and we will look at this when we look at the minors. But we have one last major arcana to look at, and that one being the one associated with the element of fire itself. So we have to look at Judgment. Now, Judgment brings forth all the things that we have talked about from all the previous cards before this. Judgment is representative of judgment. An authority is judging you, usually. Rebirth, change, higher calling. Usually, if you are being judged in this manner, it is a harmonious, positive change. Unlike the Tower card, which is negative change, usually. It usually means that it's more of a rough change. This card is the harmonious change. This is kind of something has been judged as being unworthy, it is being removed, the system will change because of it. And as such, we see that this card encapsulates everything we've seen before. Everything that we've talked about. The Emperor card, authority figures. The Tower, destruction, hard change. The Strength card, the people in the card are not only welcoming this, they're basically throwing themselves at the mercy of the divine, as the girl in the Strength card is as well. The Sun card, everyone is happy in this card. Not to mention, the angel in this card is the Archangel Michael. This card is literally one of the most fiery cards, not to mention that the Archangel Michael is also in the Temperance card. Like, there's so much going on in this one card that encapsulates every part of the major arcana of fire. And as such, this is all about the change. There is a burning, because these people could possibly be dead. That's entirely possible here. No one is spared from this, as kind of fire is an indiscriminate force. But here we see everything encapsulated in the higher forces of fire in this one card. So, now, and we're not going to talk about the court cards here, but we will talk about the rest of the minor arcana. So, going through, we will notice a lot of various themes about fire. The themes of fire are action, authority, change, and movement. Those are the four we need to really pay attention to here. Now, I just mentioned I'm not talking about the court cards, but just know that the court cards, all of them are very dynamic. A lot of them have a questing feel. The Page and the Knight of Wands specifically feel like they're going on adventures. And very much the Queen and King feel the authority figures in this role. Now, on to the minor arcanas, starting with the first minor arcana. That is the Ace. We are talking about the Ace of Wands now. So, the Ace of Wands, we have inspiration, opportunities, and new growth. Now, growth is just change, obviously. There's leaves on the wands, which symbolized it was changing and all that stuff. It is kind of a projection tool for the will in magical systems, so you're kind of projecting things, so it's like you're kind of exerting your authority magically. Yeah, this one, given that we just talked about all the majors, this is kind of basically just reiterating, take how condensed the majors were, and in the judgment card, how condensed they were in the judgment card, and condense it even more. So, yeah, this is all about new beginnings and all that. Adding a +1 to the number of wands, we have the Two of Wands. The Two of Wands is the first placement of a sign. So, this card, the next card, and the Four of Wands are going to all be in the sign of Aries. We're going to keep that in mind when we think about this, judging based on astrological knowledge. So, this one, we have a king who is looking out at his kingdom. He has the world in his hand. He's making plans. This card is all about planning, progress, and decisions. It can also be discovery, as he is kind of wearing an explorer's cap, I guess. This guy is kind of looking out at the world, seeing what he sees, and understanding his place in it as the ruler of his kingdom. Note, this is not a king card. This could be a king, though. It could also just be somebody in a high state of authority. And as such, this individual holds the authority to do with their world what they will. Ever onward to the next card, we have the Three of Wands. This card, once again, is about planning and progress. Now, interesting note, if you look at the tarot, you'll notice that there's a lot of planning cards with fire. And there's a lot of planning, balance, and if there's not planning, there ends up being a lot of conflict. This generally is how the cards will go. It's just kind of the nature of the element. As such, this is kind of a card about opportunities, great strength. This is actually the card associated with the Sun in Aries, which is the Sun in Exaltation. And as such, we can see that this is all about goals, looking at the horizon, at the new future that you can make for yourself. This individual owns these ships. As such, he's got great prestige, power, success, all of the things that you would want in your life. And Aries has caused this to be a fruitful opportunity for him, as it's kind of a new venture he's gone on. Or an old venture. Usually this is a newer venture, though, due to its nature being one of the earlier cards. Once more, we go up one, and we have an interesting card. Now, this card doesn't exactly seem like a very fiery card, but it makes sense. So, the next card we need to talk about is Four of Wands. Now, this is a wedding ceremony. This is a wedding ceremony where the girl has asked the dude out. That is 100% what is going on here. As you can see that on the left, the girl is there. She's dressed in white and blue. And on the right, we have the man who is just kind of there participating. And we see that this is a very interesting ceremony. This is kind of a love card, honestly, which makes sense given that this is Venus in Aries. Venus asking and taking the initiative, which is not a thing Venus likes to do, but in this card we see that it's generally pretty prosperous because this is kind of the I like you, let's get married card. This traditional meanings of this card are celebration, harmony, relaxation, weddings, all those kind of things. And we see that very clearly in this card. Not really much to say here other than, yeah, this is pretty much that. Jumping into the next card, we have one of the cards of Leo, starting the next triplicate of Leo. So, This is the Five of Wands. The Five of Wands is an all-out brawl. This card is a strife card. This is conflict, disagreement, competition, tension. So this can be internal or external. Generally speaking, you will have internal conflict being a different kind of card. This is normally a disagreement with somebody. It could be a fight, physical or verbal. It really depends on the situation. But generally speaking, this is what happens when multiple people with very strong fiery passions come into conflict with another and have a battle of wills. As such, this is kind of a demonstration of what a battle of wills would look like. Quick rule about tarot, all the minor cards have a rule of 5 is always negative and 6 is always positive, so 6 of Wands. So, 6 of Wands is a parade ceremony. It's victory, success, public recognition, confidence. This is the man has come back, and if you look, he was one of the men from the 5 of Wands card. He has won his battle, and he is going through and celebrating with a parade. Now, he picked up a dude somewhere along the way, but, interesting things happen. I guess this is a friends through victory kind of thing. But generally speaking, this is going to be all about your public recognition, your success, your happiness. This man has now been crowned the king, which is a very Leo thing. Now, the next card will show us that not all the time that, sometimes people don't like being bossed around by the king, because sometimes the king can be a bit of a jerk. And when that happens, we have the 7 of Wands. 7 of Wands is a man fighting for his position. This is challenge, conflict, protection, preservation, competition. He has the high ground, yet his footing is unstable. If you look, his shoes are not correct. He has mismatched shoes. Therefore, his footing is unstable. He might not even want to be fighting for what he's fighting for. But he fights nonetheless, because when you got 6 dudes coming after you, you kinda gotta defend yourself, even if they're all coming at you evenly matched. Granted, this individual is very much, he's got the high ground, so he could feasibly win. But that being said, he's also up against 6 guys, so it is overwhelming odds, but he does have an advantage. Interesting thing to note, if you were paying attention, is that the signs of Aries, the 3 cards associated with Aries, kind of tell a story of this man or woman planning for marriage, and then she ends up taking the initiative. He was planning his business, and he ended up getting picked up and swooped up by this lady. If you look at the Leo cards, though, the 5, the 6, and the 7, it tells a story of a competition and a man being victorious, and then kind of a pride coming before the fall type of situation, which is one of the vices of Leo. Because if we look at it as the winner of number 5 was the person riding the horse in number 6, and that same person is the one fighting in number 7, then he had to have done something to piss off those 6 guys. Because that's 2 more guys than before, right? So this can be a King's Fall situation. Now, interestingly, the next few cards are going to be more about bad news. If we look at it through this lens, preemptive spoilers for the tarot. The 8, 9, and 10 are kind of sort of a good swift action and then realizing you've made a terrible mistake. Now we get to the 8 of Wands. This is a change card. This is one of the fast-paced movement cards. Action. There's not a lot coming and going on in this, but there could be a way of looking at this as these are arrows falling from the sky. They are, in fact, above the ground, so it's entirely possible that this is meant to be a barrage of arrows. It could be that it's just a very swift message. But generally speaking, you'll see that this is swiftness, speed, quickness, all things associated with going fast. Which is the seeming opposite of the Nine of Wands. The Nine of Wands is a man with his back against the wall. He's beaten, he's broken, and he has got a lot of stuff going on. He doesn't want to fight, but he's ready to throw down. This is a very resilient man. He's got the courage, the perseverance, and all things required in order to succeed at his goal. Interestingly, this is a Sagittarian card, which is kind of interesting because Sagittarius does not like to have its back against the wall. It always wants to be traveling. And the previous card demonstrated that really well, but this one is more of a finding your courage type of thing. So, that's an interesting note. Last card of the video. So, we have the Ten of Wands. We've noticed that in the last card and this card specifically, very much more this card, there's a heavy burden of not wanting to do something. This is what we call burnout. Yes, the tarot does demonstrate burnout through these two cards. The Nine of Wands is a card where you don't really want to do something, but you do it anyways. This is, you're forced to do it even though you really don't want to. This guy very much doesn't want to be doing this. This is hard work, heavy burden. It is completion, but it's kind of a pyrrhic victory, where you win, but at what cost, kinda. That kind of thing. Just a little bit. This is mostly about he is overworked, he's tired, he doesn't want to be doing this, and interestingly, the astrological placement for this one is the placement of Saturn in Sagittarius. So there's no movement. He doesn't want to be moving. But he has to move anyways, because Saturn is also a responsibility. He has a responsibility to travel and do this thing, and he's got a heavy burden he does not want to be doing. And that's going to wrap it up. That has been... Oh man. Okay, so we just went through all the major arcana associated with the tarot and all of the minor court cards associated with the tarot, minus the court cards, which we're not really going to talk about at this point, because So, those are all of the tarot cards associated with the element of fire. And I hope you have enjoyed this video as much as I have enjoyed making it. Enjoy. Please use this knowledge for good, not evil, and have a nice day. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, leave a comment of what you would like to see next, and leave a rating. If you disliked this, please put it in the comments in the form of an insult. I find those hilarious. Goodbye.